To promote my new flower shop, I had one place print my business cards, another print my brochures, and a third, my signs. Now my roses aren't red, my violets aren't blue, my geraniums look dead, and I don't know what to do.
Staples can help your business stand out with signs, banners, and brochures that are a true reflection of your company. And now at Staples, spend $50 or more on print and marketing services and get $5 off your next in-store purchase.
Now my business is blossoming, and I'm spending less green.
Exclusions apply. In-store only. Ends 6/23/18.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
To Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group here in New York City, New York. Call us in right now at 929-477-3997. Again, beloved, that is 929-477-3997. Now, if you live outside of the continental United States of America, call us in right now at 1-929-477-3997. Again, beloved, that is 1-929-477-3997. Now, GSRR Media Group here in New York City. We are nationally syndicated through the Talk America Radio Network out of Dallas, Texas. Now, beloved, the Talk America Radio Network is indeed the new dominant force in conservative talk radio, and we are also ever so blessed to be a part of the iHeart Radio Network in the iHeart Media Group, also here in New York. Now we have access to at least 300 million people in 150 markets around the world. 929-477-3997. I am so excited to have back with us America's #1 political scientist. He is the founder and the CEO of the world-renowned Zephyr Publishing Group, LLC, there in Eureka, Montana. If you get an opportunity, go to Zephyr.net. Again, Zephyr.net, that's capital CEPHER.net, and order your Ed Zephyr today. Now, the Ed Zephyr is the #1 comprehensive restoration of sacred scripture in the English language today. Purchase this at Zephyr, and I guarantee you God will transform and transliterate your thinking and your spiritual growth there in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. 929-477-3997. Again, America's #1 political scientist, and I believe, and including my staff here and all of our listeners around the world, that the Honorable Dr. Stephen Pidgeon is the greatest teacher that we have ever heard. I'm telling you, in the years that we have been on the air. And Dr. Pidgeon, thank you so much for, again, sir, taking the time out of your business schedule to be with us today on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio.
Well, Bishop, it's my great pleasure to join you again today and to come alongside your ministry, a very powerful ministry indeed. And I've been watching your work, and of course, it's such a great pleasure to join the Global Spiritual Revolution Radio in what we're doing in these times, particularly these critical times in which we're in. And so every study and every transaction and every discussion so greatly helps what is happening and the understanding of those who are listening. And, so I'm so thankful to be on the air with you, Bishop. It's just my great pleasure.
Oh, the honor and the pleasure is ours, man of God. We are so grateful that God has given us the very best. And we here at Global Spiritual Revolution Radio in New York City, New York, we are ever so blessed to be a part of what I call the most powerful publishing group in America, the Zerah Publishing Group in GSRR. I'm telling you, we are just a little cell within the Zerah Publishing Group, but wow, man, what a powerful teacher we have here tonight. And we're going to get into a brand new series of discussions, and again, for the first time that I can recall in the history of 35 years in ministry, I have never taught on this following subject that this great man of God is going to be talking on for the next few weeks, and that is the migration of the lost tribes of Israel. Oh my, again, the migration of the lost tribes of Israel, part number one. Before we get into the furtherance of tonight's discussion, Dr. Pidgeon, can you lead us into a word of prayer?
Yes, it'd be my pleasure. We start tonight, Bishop, with you and I joining together, joining our voices together, joining in the name of our Messiah, who is also joined with us in prayer, because two or more of us have gathered in his most precious and beloved name. And we lift up our prayers now. We lift up the brothers and sisters in particular. And I want to take this time to lift up the brothers and sisters who are suffering isolation because they have chosen to be faithful, that they have heard the word and have followed it, that they have listened, that they have said, "Here I am, send me," and they have been sent, and now they find themselves being attacked, they find themselves being separated from brothers and sisters, from mothers and fathers, even in husbands and wives, as someone says, "I love you" to the father, and the other one says, "I hate you." And so while this happens, we know that the wheat will be separated from the chaff. And we know that these times have come, and we know that this apostasy into which so many will fall is now upon us, and the rise of this apostasy. And for those brothers and sisters who are suffering these slings and arrows, we pray now for a great peace, a peace that surpasses understanding, and a great surrounding of the angels of the Father to come and spread their wings over you, to bring comfort and solace and mercy and compassion and all of these things in order to bring you safety and to bring you beauty, and the love of the Father might be in you now, and that you would experience that love. And we also pray for the lost brothers and sisters, those who are struggling and who say to themselves, "I have so many questions, yet I have no answers." And including the struggling youth, those who find themselves in high schools and say, "I just can't figure my way out of this. I don't know who I am. I can't figure my way out of this." The complexity of life is hanging over the head like a giant sword. And yet there is a peace that surpasses understanding in the hands of Mashiach, whose yoke is easy, whose burden is light, and whose call is a call of beauty and wonder and love and peace and solace and comfort and mercy. And I just pray that this would reach out to those who say to themselves, "These people don't know my struggle. These people that are on the radio don't know my struggle. They don't understand what I'm going through. They're just out here mouthing the words." We may not understand your struggle, but the Heavenly Father understands your struggle.
Oh, glory. Oh, glory.
A merciful, compassionate Yah who carries every tear in his hand and knows every word. And for those people, I pray now that the Holy Spirit would come down now like a gush of a mighty wind, like the pouring down of rain, like a vast and heavenly power to move through the lives of those who are lost and those who are struggling, and brings this freshness that you see now with your own eyes, that the Son of Man did in fact walk across the water, that the Son of Man did in fact do the things that he said he did, that the Son of Man calls out to you and says, call me your friend. I am here. And may those who listen to this today be blessed in these words, be comforted in these words, and may our discussions today be a warm salve, a comforting, and a grace to those who are here today. And Bishop, I also pray for your ministry, and I pray for Global Spiritual Revolution Radio, that those who are working with you and your staff may also be lifted up, comforted, and brought to a new level in the kingdom, a level of ecstasy, a level of joy, a level of brightness, and that your light might shine in the dark places. So we lift this prayer now in the glorious name of our Messiah, who lifts the prayers with us with groans before the throne of the Father. Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pidgeon, 929-477-3997. The migration of the lost tribes of Israel. Again, the migration of the lost tribes of Israel. We've been receiving a plethora of emails, man of God, all day long, and from our listeners. Is there a difference between a Hebrew versus a Jew? Is there a difference between a Hebrew versus a Jew? They're getting into a lot of them are asking questions. Where are these tribes today? Are they in Africa, Europe, Asia? And so, man of God, I'm so excited. The floor is yours. The migration of the lost tribes of Israel.
Well, Bishop, I have to tell you, these are exciting times, and I think we're going to find that these pages of the Bible, those pages that are stuck together where the gold hasn't been pulled apart, those pages, we're going to peel those apart today, and we're going to find some really interesting things. And it does tie back to, you and I had discussed and spent some time discussing the sex of the serpent. And we're going to see that, in fact, we haven't freed ourselves from the serpent. Over all of this time, the serpent came and was present in the garden and has never gone away. And that serpent competes with the Heavenly Father, and that serpent says, did he really say? Did he really say? And we have this deception, and we have this, accusation, and really, and we have something that leads to death and to murder in the serpent.
Yes.
But what we have in the lost tribes is such an interesting history, because as we go to sort this out, we're going to discover when we talk about Hebrews, we'll say, well, Abraham was Jewish. Well, no, he wasn't, and neither was Isaac, neither was Jacob. Adam wasn't Jewish. Noah wasn't Jewish. None of them were Jewish. In fact, you don't get to this word Hebrew until you get to this, patriarch whose name was Aber. What you normally see in most English texts is Aber. But actually his name was Ebro or Ebru. And so we get Hebrew from the name Ebru. And he was the grandfather of Abraham. And so Abraham didn't identify himself with his father, but instead identified himself with his grandfather, Eber or Ebru. And so you have this idea of the Hebrews. Now, when you talk about Hebrews, remember that Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Yitzhak or Isaac. And Ishmael had 12 sons. Isaac had 2 sons, but one of them would go on to have 12 sons. All of those sons, the 12 sons of Ishmael, also have a blessing in Scripture. The 12 sons of Jacob or Yaakov, they also have a specific blessing. And really what we see in the Bible is the history of those 12 sons, or what we call the house of Yasharel. Now, this is distinguishable from this word Israel, because in the word Israel, that's very interesting. You read in the English Bible and you read Jezreel, right? The Valley of Jezreel.
Yes.
When you look at that in the Hebrew, that word is Yitzriel, or Yisrael. And so you had the northern kingdom that was called Yisrael, and the southern kingdom that was called Yahud. We know it as Judea.
Yes.
However, the house of Israel was not the house of Israel, because you have this word, which in the Hebrew, Yod, Shin, Resh, Aleph, Lamed. Aleph, Lamed, El, like El Shaddai, El Elyon, the mighty El, Aleph, Lamed, is before it comes three letters, Yod, Shin, Resh. Now, this is how you spell Israel in the modern world. But in the ancient world, it wasn't pronounced Israel. It was pronounced Yashar'el. And Yashar means the upright in El. Compare that to the word Ishrael. Ish in Hebrew means man. El, of course, would be God. And then who is Ra? Ra is evil. So you have Ishrael would be the evil man in God, as compared to Yashar'el, which is the upright in God. Comes from the same spelling.
Yes.
When we go into this migration of the tribes, you have some interesting things happen because, of course, the tribes are not really relevant until they appear. And the tribes gathered themselves together during the time of the Great Famine when Joseph was in Egypt. And they had sent him to Egypt as a slave because, of course, the older brothers wanted to kill him. And it was Judah that, in particular, that wanted to kill Joseph. And Reuben was the one who said, "Let's don't kill him. Just put him over here in this well, right? And we'll sell him as a slave." But it's so funny because when they come to Joseph in Egypt, it's Judah who comes to him and says, "I pledge to my father to return Benjamin to my father. And if I don't bring Benjamin back, my father's going to die." Because Judah knew the grief and the suffering and the pain that he witnessed his father go through when they told him that Joseph was dead.
Yes.
In the Hebrew world, Bishop, you're supposed to grieve for the dead for 1 month, and then you move on. But Yaakov grieved for a year, and he still wasn't past Joseph. He just wasn't beyond it. And so you had this huge loss. And so here's Judah standing before Joseph, and he says, "I can't let you keep Benjamin. Keep me, and let's send Benjamin back." But that's not what Joseph did. Ultimately, his father and all 12 of the tribes and their wives all come to Egypt. And so here we see this coalescing. So when we start talking about the tribes of Israel, or Yashar'el, they first coalesce and begin to grow in slavery in Egypt. This is going to become an important point because when we talk about, Hebrews, you have to keep in mind that many of the tribes of Yashar'el did, in fact, some retained in Egypt. There were children of the tribes in Ethiopia. Some of the tribes migrated south through Ethiopia, even as far as South Africa. And, of course, the tribe of Dan were seafarers, and the tribe of Dan really staked out a big position in what is now modern Côte d'Ivoire, in Cameroon, in Nigeria, and in Ghana. The tribe of Dan was huge in this area, big pocket. And so you do see many Afrikaners in the house of Israel. Now, in addition to this, you have these tribes now begin to spread. Now, today's discussion, we're going to talk about one particular tribe, and it's a tribe that is not greatly discussed in Scripture, but this tribe has become very, very important. And as we go into this discussion, I want to talk about this one aspect of the migration of the tribes that was really kind of brought out by Sir Isaac Newton, and later expanded even greater by the late David Flynn, who wrote a great deal on the work of Isaac Newton. And they have essentially talked about the eras of mankind and the spreading of the gospel in accordance with how far you are from Jerusalem. And that there is a certain number of years from Jerusalem, from the fall of the Second Temple, that you see the gospel spread in accordance mileage versus the years and how they correlate to one another. That's one part of this. Another part of this is that we see this, let's call it a theology, if you will, of what takes place when you see a tribe move into an area, and then you have this idea of the prayer of Moses that says, you will come into the area, you will beg for the blessings of the Father, he will give you those blessings, then you will grow fat, right? It says you will wax fat. And once you wax fat, you'll start saying, oh, this is our stuff, we did this, we're great, we're cool people, we're responsible for all this, right? You'll take credit for it, and you'll stop praising the Father who bestowed this on you and start taking credit for it yourself. And then you're going to fall away, and you'll fall into idolatry, and you'll start following other people, and you'll start following other Elohim, and you will become corrupt, and your ways will become corrupt. And then judgment will come upon you. And then when judgment comes upon you, you will fall again, and you will be seeking the Father again, and the cycle begins anew. And we see this happening now more and more, and we're going to see how this is going to unfold with this migration of the tribes and what takes place now in Northern Africa and Europe as a result of this migration and how it leads to where we are today. So we're going to begin with the story of Judah and his two sons, Zerah and Perez. And in particular, today's study is going to be on the migration of the house of Zerah. And this study kind of, let's see, this one is rarely discussed. And as we do discuss it, keep this in mind too, Bishop, a lot of what has happened in the modern world is now actively being scrubbed from the net so that this discussion gets curtailed and cannot speak the full truth of what's here. And I'll show you how this is happening now. So we start with Zerah. So we have a passage that, in Genesis chapter 38, we have this discussion about what Judah's up. Judah is told, whatever you do, don't take a Canaanite woman. Now, why was he told not to take a Canaanite woman? Because the Canaanites were cannibals. They were cannibals. Yes. I mean, the historic record says they were covered with tattoos, covered with piercings, and cannibals. And they also put their children through the fire to Molech. And when we talk about putting the children through the fire to Molech, on one hand, you had real flames. I mean, I've seen some of the statues, and they're horrific. I hope your listeners don't mind my going down this path, but when you see
go right ahead.
Well, you have Molech that has his arms extended, and they're metal, right? This was a metal statue. And they would start the bonfires beneath it, and they'd put the baby up on the arms of the statue of Molech until the baby could not arch its back pain and would fall into the fire. And the people would be dancing and chanting and screaming and yelling so that they couldn't hear the screams of the baby. And this was a very common practice. Now, how much of this, Bishop, was the voluntary act of the people, and how much of that was imposed upon them by their leaders? I don't know. I personally believe that when you have a leader who wants to take control of a people, they keep looking for ways to inflict fear on the people. Well, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to arrest you, right? Or if you don't do what I say, then I'm going to hang you. If you don't do what I say, then I'm going to cut your feet off or cut your hands off or I'm going to cut your head off. But if you really want to terrorize a people, you say to them, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to kill your children. And to really up the terror from there, you say, well, we have so much authority and control here, we're going to arbitrarily take your children. Not all of them. Ones that we pick out of some random cycle. Now, we saw an example of this in the Hunter Games, right? We're going to pick one child from each of the 12 divisions, and they're going to fight it out to the death to the last man. So you have 11 children in their prime that are going to be sacrificed for this game. But that's not the only place you see it. You see this idea of this arbitrary selection of the children. Let's go back and talk about the draft during the Vietnam War. We're going to artificially select through some random selection process the young men in this country, and we're going to send them to die. And it would be one thing if we were talking about fighting a righteous war between us and an unrighteous enemy. But to fight a war in order to keep the heroin traffic up in the hands of the elite and to send young men to arbitrarily die is outrageous. And we both know, Bishop, that that's going on today.
Yes.
And I don't know how many military men I've talked to recently who have said, I took an oath to defend the Constitution. And then I get deployed to some of these theaters and we're there defending drug lords. And I ask myself the question, what am I doing?
Wow. Right.
But nonetheless, when we have the draft, you have an arbitrary selection. We have enough power to choose which one of your children are going to die arbitrarily and on a random basis. Now, when that happens, at least before World War II, tribes would move. People would leave. They'd say, I'm not going to stick around here for this. I'm not going to stick around here to have you kill my children. If the threat is you're going to kill my children, then I'm going to get on a boat and I'm going to go row my boat somewhere until I find someplace where you aren't. And so you see, I mean, why would you have people populating the north slope of Asia and North America? Because they were trying to get away from some government, some arbitrary guy that was going to kill everything, right, in order to keep control.
Right.
I think a lot of this putting the children through the fire to Molech was a government command. The rulers were saying, your children shall do this, you shall put your children here. And I think there was also a certain amount of witchcraft, i.e. pagan ritual, that allowed people to do this too, the fertility goddess, worship of this Molech. And again, when we talk about Molech, we're talking about a fallen demon, a fallen angel.
Yes.
Molech, Malak, right? And again, as someone who is associated with this sect of the serpent, a watcher commissioned to come and watch over humanity who fell and joined those who fell out of heaven and who committed great unforgivable sin on the earth. So, but when we see this command to follow Molech, this is what was happening in the Canaanite community. And so here you have Judah, his father, who was also told, don't marry a Canaanite woman. It's shocking. Don't marry a Canaanite woman. So he had to travel all the way up to his uncle's house, Uncle Laban's house, in order to find a wife, in order to avoid marrying a Canaanite woman. But Judah goes ahead and marries a Canaanite woman, and he has 3 sons, my 3 sons, right? And he goes out and he says, well, after a while, I got to find a wife for my oldest son. So he goes and he gets a Hebrew girl named Tamar, and he says, you're the wife for my son, and his son Er. And I think that's probably the root of the word error, right? Or the son Er. So anyway, he brings in Tamar for his son, but his son was wicked. Scripture reads that he was slain. He was slayed by the father.
Yes.
And so she was to pass to his brother Onan, and Onan refused to touch her. And so he died. So Judah says, well, look, you can marry my youngest son as soon as he gets old enough. Now, we don't know how old Shilach was, but he might have been 3, and she might have been 21. And so, by the time he turns 21, he's going to be 40, right? I want to marry a 21-year-old. Get out of here. So anyway, Tamar sets herself up as a prostitute, and Judah goes after the prostitute. Now, look, this is the story that's in Scripture. I didn't make this up. Judah went up and was propositioning her as a prostitute. And he says, how much? And she says, well, give me your staff and your ring and your cloak. And he does. And she ends up pregnant, and he wants to stone her to death until she says, well, look, you can stone me if you want, but here's the John paid me. Here's his staff, his cloak, and his ring. And so he says, okay, well, I guess you're more righteous than me. So she, of course, is pregnant with twins, and she gives birth to two sons, Perez and Zerah. Now, Zerah, when she was giving birth, Zerah, his hand comes out, and a red ribbon is put around his hand. But then the hand is withdrawn, and Perez is born. And then Zerah is born. So Perez, who knows who the firstborn is? According to the scriptures, Zerah was the firstborn, which would make Perez the secondborn and the Et Yachid, the beloved one. So Zerah, so now Zerah's history is going to be kind of obfuscated. In fact, if you look in all of the old writings, the Torah and all the writings, Joshua, etc., you will not find a listing of the sons of Zerah. It's only when Ezra recaptures the history in 1st and 2nd Chronicles that we get the actual names of the sons of Zerah. Now, these sons are going to become extremely important. Okay, so the list of the sons is found in 1st Chronicles, chapter 2, in verse 6. And it says, the sons of Zerah are Zimri, Etan, Haman, Calcol, and Dara, 5 of them in all. Now, these boys are going to become pretty significant because, now you can imagine, Judah is bringing these boys, Zerah and Perez, to the land of Goshen in Egypt. And then Zerah is having his kids in Egypt, right?
Yes.
So what happened? Well, the first is Calcol. Now, he came to be known in the Greek world as Kekrops. And he was the first king of Attica, or the founder of the city of Athens. Kekrops. And the story goes that he came into the area with a band of Israelites, or Yasharalim, from Egypt, and they showed up, hey, let's found a city. And he became the first king. Now, what's amazing about this is that when they depict him in history, he's man from the waist up, but serpent from the waist that we have. Once again, you see that we're going to impose the sect of the serpent to disguise the history so you can't see what's going on. So Calcol, he was the first one to offer sacrifices to the goddess Athena. Now, he was the first one in this particular setting to offer sacrifices to the goddess Athena. But bear in mind that Athena is the Greek name for the goddess Ishtar, also known as Semiramis, the wife of Nimrod. And this is the heart of Babylonianism, that you have this pagan fertility goddess that in the book of Jeremiah is referred to as the Queen of Heaven. And the Queen of Heaven always had sacrifices given to her. In fact, it's very interesting because about in Jeremiah, he talks about baking cakes to the Queen of Heaven, right? That's how you read it in English. Baking cakes to the Queen of Heaven. When you look at that in the Hebrew, that word there is kivan, which actually means baking a sacrificial wafer to the Queen of Heaven. This fertility goddess. Okay. So the first one to offer sacrifices to the fertility goddess in Greece, the fertility goddess named Athena rather than Ishtar, is Kekrops, the son of Zerah. And he is the one who established the shrine on the Acropolis in Greece, which, by the way, that shrine is still there, right? Still there.
Yes.
In fact, they built a huge temple to Athena on top of the Acropolis. Okay. So this, I don't know how they got the name Kekrops, right? But he left Egypt before the Exodus of the Bible. And so his founding of Athens is going to be around 1550 BC. First king of Attica. He was said to have divided the inhabitants into 12 communities and to institute the laws of marriage, property, and a new form of sacrifice or a new form of worship, which was bloodless sacrifice. Now, let's take a moment here, Bishop, if we can.
Yeah, take your time.
Well, we've arrived at a very difficult issue, and I'm going to raise this issue. I know I'm going to get the hackles up on some people's back of the neck, but I got to raise the issue.
Go ahead, Doc. Teach.
You know, you have all of this discussion in Leviticus and so forth about the blood sacrifices. Okay?
Yes.
And so-and-so took 2 bulls and 7 lambs, or, Solomon took 1,000 bulls and 1,000 head of sheep and, 4 goats and 6 birds. I don't know what it was, but you have this roster of continual blood sacrifices. In fact, when you go back and you look at when the house of Israel was coming into the Exodus, they're out in the wilderness, they're traveling. Moses is the one who said, we have to have a morning oblation and an evening oblation. And they would put a lamb on the fire in the morning and a lamb on the fire in the evening. Now, I'm not quite sure what the reasoning was there, but I think part of it had to do with the fact that in Egypt, as in Canaan, there was cannibalism. Now, this is a difficult subject, but cannibalism is banned in the Torah. Now, why would you have a specific edict saying, and no cannibalism, if you didn't have the problem, right? And so when you look at cannibalism, now, keep this in mind, when we in the modern world, if you're a meat eater, if you're a beef eater, well, you don't mind the slaughter. The slaughter might be gross and all that, but you're okay with it. If you're a chicken eater, you don't mind the slaughter of the chickens. It's just the way it is, right?
Right.
But what if you have a taste for human flesh? Do you mind the slaughter? This becomes a big question because we have people now and industries now that are trying to introduce the taste of human flesh into the food supply. They have been taking fetal tissue from aborted fetuses and using that fetal tissue to create flavor supplements that goes into common food eaten in the United States.
Jeez. Wow.
And it gets worse from here. You have in China, there has been a breeding process going on in order to try to create transplantable organs for human beings. And so they have blended human DNA with pig DNA because the pig's heart is about the same size as a human heart. And so they are blending human DNA with pig DNA in order to create transplantable organs. Now, I can tell you, I'm not accepting a pig's heart for a transplant, okay? I mean, it's just not
right.
Right.
Yes, sir. Right.
They say there's a certain amount of memory inside the organ when it's transplanted.
Yes.
Right? What kind of memories do you get when you transplant a pig's organ, right? I don't want it.
No.
But but the problem is these pigs that they're creating that have a blend of human DNA with these pigs are also being slaughtered to create pork for the food supply. So we as people don't know what we're getting fed to us now, right? And if you can produce the taste in the mouth where you develop the taste for human flesh, do you mind the slaughter? Now, if it becomes accepted in human society to eat human flesh, does it bother you to see one of these meat shops with human beings hanging on the hooks?
Ugh.
And to tell you quite frankly, Bishop, I've seen those photos.
Wow.
So
my God.
I believe that Moshe said here, Moshe was saying, look, you people need to get away from eating human flesh. talk about what flesh you can eat, what flesh you can't eat. We're going to have very specific stuff, and I'm going to put the lamb on the fire. You can smell the lamb all day long, and it's not going to be human flesh on the fire. It's going to be the lamb on the fire. That's what you're going to smell.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's the case, but I think that may have been the case during that time. So now, if you look and you see what happened with this son of Zerah, when he gets to Athens, he's going to introduce a bloodless sacrifice. That's going to be consistent with what Solomon is going to later say about the temple, that this house shall be a house of prayer for all nations.
Yes.
And there are many people who believe that when Solomon made that statement, they began to pull away from the blood. Now, while we're talking about the blood, let's talk about this passage that shows up in Leviticus 17:11. Passage becomes so central and so critical to all of the religions in the world today, because there are still people who believe that blood sacrifice is required. And we've seen evidence of that blood sacrifice when we saw the shooting in Las Vegas on Yom Kippur.
Yes.
When we saw the bombing in Syria at the T4 Iranian base on the last day of Matzah. When we saw the bombing that took place on the second Passover. There are people who believe that blood sacrifice is still required. There are people that believe that blood is required to atone for the sins of the nation. For instance, the rabbi that ordered the slaughter of the Tsar and his whole family believed that their blood was necessary to be shed for the sins of the Tsars of Russia. Now, Leviticus 17:11, Vayikra 17:11 does not give us that. And this is where we get into probably the most important scripture in all of Scripture, the most important verse in all of Scripture. When you read 17:11, it says, "For the life of the blood is in the flesh, and I have given it to you on the altar as atonement for the blood is atonement," right?
Yes.
Very important phrase. And, and when you see that the life of the flesh is in the blood, what does this tell you? If there is blood present, life is present. Now, any farmer can tell you what's the difference between a fertilized egg and a non-fertilized egg. It's the presence of blood. And the presence of blood in the womb from the blood of the mother, sometimes so distinct, the mother has to take medication to keep the baby's blood from actually killing her. And the baby's blood is always distinct from the mother's blood. It's a distinct blood type.
Yes.
So when that blood becomes present, what Leviticus 17:11 is telling you, life is present. Life is present. A soul is present when the blood is present. Now, that's totally distinguishable from the Talmud that says it's okay to abort up until the day before the child is born. That may be what the Talmud provides, but the Torah says it's in the blood. Now, when we looked at that passage, we found something that was just screaming out at us, Bishop. And I mean, I'm telling you, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. But it reads, when you get to this passage, it doesn't say that the life of the flesh is in the blood. It says the soul of the flesh is in the blood. And then the next passage is not, I have given it to you upon the altar. It's, he and I have given it to you upon the altar as an atonement for your souls. For his blood in your soul is atonement.
Wow.
Now, this harkens us back to Proverbs 30, verse 4, where it says, what is, who has ascended first, who has ascended but that he descended first, right? And who has set the boundaries of the water and who has stopped the wind? What is his name and his son's name, if you can tell?
Yes. Teach, Doc. That's right.
Solomon is the one that wrote that.
Yes, sir.
And so what is his name and his son's name? Well, I don't know, but those are the same two guys who show up in Vayikra saying, he and I have given this blood on the altar as an atonement. He and I.
Yes.
So what Leviticus 17:11 is telling everyone is that there's only one blood that is atoning for the soul. And it is a blood that has a Y DNA that is sacred from the Father alone. It is a divine blood.
Yes.
And this divine blood is what is an atonement for your soul. So forget about sacrificing other people's blood or other animals' blood. And so, I've taught this from time to time, Bishop, but of course, people go crazy. Are you trying to tell me I can't eat meat? No, I'm not trying to tell you that. I'm just trying to tell you that, in Jeremiah 7:21, he says, look, if you want to slaughter a bull, go slaughter a bull and eat the flesh, right? But I did not command you of these kinds of sacrifices when I brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Right.
Jeremiah 7:21. And Psalm 40, verse 6 says, slaughtering and offering and burnt offerings I have not required for you, for a body I have prepared for you. Right?
Yes.
So you have this teaching that was consistent with what K-Crops or Calcol, the son of Zerah, brought to the people of Athens. Now, so if we understand that it was a grandson of Judah that formed the city of Athens, let's continue. What about this son Zerah? Now, Zerah in the Hebrew presents an interesting problem, and this is one of the things that we find quite often, Bishop, when we're looking at the Hebrew. You have these little issues of the Torah scroll and some of these Hebrew letters that are kind of confusing. Like, for instance, if I told you that the letter Yod, Vav, and Nun Safit, and I drew them for you, Yod is half a line, Vav is a whole line, and Nun Safit is a line and a half, right? So if you're looking at them, you're seeing 3 dashes. Well, if I'm getting fancy with the script, which one did I use? I'm writing it out, and I've got some letters that are bigger than others. And, I want to put a little artistic framework in there. What do you get there? Is that a Nun? Is that a Vav? Is that a Yod? I don't know what it is. So people would guess. No, there's 2 other letters that have been forever problematic in Hebrew, which is Dalet and Resh, D and R. Dalet and Resh. Resh is kind of curved. Dalet has got a point there at the end. Okay. So when you have this name Zerah, you have this name Dalet Resh Ayin. But if there was a second Resh in there, impossible in the Hebrew. But they may have seen it as a second Resh when the name was actually Darda. Dalet Resh, Dalet. So Darda, Zerah, the son of Zerah, would go on to found the empire of Dardania. Now, Dardania was along the waterways, what they call the Dardanelles, which is the waterway that connects the Aegean Sea with the Black Sea. Zerah, he would form Dardania, and its main city was Troy. So here you have one son of Zerah forming Athens, and you have another son forming Troy.
Yes,
and eventually they would war, right? But it's very interesting what happens to Zerah or Darda and the Dardanian tribes, because when Troy is defeated, they move. Now, this Dardanian empire included these people in an area called Lydia, which was in the Anatolian Peninsula, and now modern-day Turkey. These people, Lydia, the sons of Shem, these people would join in this empire of Dardania. And you had this group of Athenians over here under Calcol, who would also join with the seafarers that came out from Phoenicia, the Phoenician seafarers, which would be the house of Asher and the house of Zebulun. They're up there in Athens too. These people fight with one another. Some of the sons of Troy escape, and they go and form a place called Latinum, which is on the Italian peninsula. And the grandson of Darda, who was named Aeneas, his son was Romulus, the first king of Rome. So you remember the story of Romulus and Remus, the two that were raised by wolves and et cetera? Right?
Right.
Now, now, I've got to tell you, when you're talking about being raised by wolves, you see this symbolism, right? In fact, if you go to Rome, you'll see wolves all over the place, showing the two wolves, or the wolves, that raised Romulus and Remus. Mm-hmm. Well, a wolf is very interesting because go back to Genesis 49, and you'll see that Jacob says to Benjamin, you will raven like the wolf. You will raven like the wolf.
That's right.
And Mashiach says these Pharisees are ravening wolves, right? They're ravening wolves. So what's he telling you? He's telling you that these Pharisees are actually from the house of Benjamin. And when they're talking about these two sons here, Romulus and Remus, who were sons of Darda, the son of Zerah, of the house of Judah, that when they say they were raised by wolves, that's symbology for they were raised by people of the house of Benjamin.
Right.
And again, all of this is going to become, you're going to start to see that when we look at what happened to these tribes, you're going to see where these dynamics now are going to create what is in the modern world, because the rest of the house of Lydia, that was also known in the Hebrew as Ludia, they were there under the reign of Darda in Troy. When Troy fell, a lot of that tribe packed it up and said, we're getting out of here entirely. We don't want anything more to do with this. They packed it up and they went out until they could find a place to put a boat in the water, and they went over and started a new town called Lud. That town would later become London.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's deep. Wow.
Yeah. And it would become London because it was a combination of Lud and the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan, who were Vikings. So Lud Dan ends up becoming London. So in the middle of London is a mountain that they call Mount Lud. And it was Paul the Apostle who preached on Mount Lud.
Yes.
At least according to the 29th chapter of the book of Acts. Take a second to talk about that for a second, Bishop.
Yeah, take your time. This is deep. Go ahead, Doc. Take your time. Yes.
Okay.
I love it.
We came upon this writing, the 29th chapter of the book of Acts.
Yes, sir.
And this writing, Brad Huckins and I were wrestling about this writing. Well, what do you think? I don't know. Well, what do you think? Hey, so we argued for about a year on this thing. Do we have the testimony of two witnesses to establish this 29th chapter of the book of Acts? And the story goes that there was a guy named Sonini, and he was commissioned by Louis XVI. And Louis XVI says, Sonini, we got all these people around here trying to create a Textus Receptus. We got Desiderius Erasmus, we got Beza, and, the Stephanus guys, all trying to write out the Greek. But I want you to go to Constantinople. And I want you to go down to the Ottoman Empire and go down to what used to be the largest church in all Christendom, which was called the Hagia Sophia, right? The Sacred Wisdom was the name of the church. Hagia Sophia, this huge church. Go down to this church, which is now a mosque, talk to the Sultan, and see if you can find some ancient writings. So Sunini says, okay, I'll do it. So he gets to Constantinople, and he talks to the Sultan. And the Sultan says, look, I know where the best stuff is stored. Okay, a lot of stuff got destroyed, but I know where the best stuff is. Let me take you to it. So he takes him down and he shows him these scrolls and all these ancient writings. And in these ancient writings, he finds the 29th chapter of the book of Acts. So he gathers up the writings and he heads back to Paris. He gets back to Paris, and guess what? They got a problem going on. Louis XVI is about to get beheaded.
Right.
So Sonini flees, and he goes to Ireland. And he says, look, store these here for me because I can't bring them back into France. So some Irish priests stored them and kept them there until the late 1880s. And when somebody finally rediscovered the manuscript, and they deciphered it, and they found, guess what, the 29th chapter of the book of Acts. And in this 29th chapter, it describes Paul not being beheaded in Rome at all, but leaving Rome, going to Spain like he said he was going to do, traveling through Spain, and then eventually going up to London, preaching on Mount Lud in London, and then back down to Switzerland, where he visited the site of Pontius Pilate's death, because Pontius Pilate killed himself, right? He jumped off a cliff.
Yes.
And then eventually going to Macedonia. So we asked ourselves the question, okay, that's great that Sunini's got this manuscript. Do we have any other witnesses? Well, you have Paul telling you in the book of Romans that he's going to go to Spain. And then you have this document that shows up from the 5th century. It's called the Moratorian Fragment. And in this fragment, this is the first time that you get a roster of the 27 books of the New Testament is in this Moratorian Fragment. And this fragment, going on to listen all the books, we have this. Okay, great. And then it goes on to make the statement when Paul traveled to Spain. So we have Paul telling us he's going to travel. We have the Moratorian Fragment saying he did travel. And then we have this 29th chapter describing the travel. So we felt that was enough to put it in. And so we add this 29th chapter of Acts. But on Mount, it's identified as Mount Lud, where Paul went. And to this day, if you go to London, you will find St. Paul's Cathedral sitting on Mount Lud in downtown London.
Wow. That's deep. I didn't know. So, this is mind-blowing. Go ahead, Doc.
Right? So we see this travel of the tribes, right? So actually these Londonians were actually Semitic people. They were of the house of Shem. Now, so Zerah now, two of his sons, one forms Athens, another forms Troy, and his grandson would later form Rome. But there is another son, this son Ethan, or Ethan, he is the one that goes out, keeps sailing, and he forms this town of Cadiz, Spain. Now, I got to tell you, this is the part of the history I love about the tribes.
Yes, go ahead.
Because, you know, the distance from Yaffo in Israel to the Straits of Gibraltar is farther away than from the tip of Africa to the tip of South America. That's a closer distance.
Wow.
So you had sailors that could sail, no problem, the whole distance of the Mediterranean. In fact, it was reported to Solomon that it took 3.5 years to circumnavigate the globe. So they had circled the earth during the times of Solomon. And we know that we've got all of this record that shows all of this seafaring traffic, most of which was done by the tribe of Zebulun, the tribe of Dan, and all the ports were being managed by the tribe of Asher. So here, Zerah comes out the Straits of Gibraltar, and he forms the town of Cadiz. Now, Cadiz would later be conquered by what they call the Phoenicians. But the Phoenicians were the house of Asher, the house of Ephraim, the house of Dan, the house of Zebulun. Those were the Phoenicians. And if you look, this is what's so cool about this history.
Teach.
There's this Hebrew called the Paleo-Hebrew, right?
Yes.
And the Paleo-Hebrew, when you look at the Paleo-Hebrew markings, this is the language that was used prior to the Babylonian captivity. When you look at this Paleo-Hebrew language, you can see very clearly this was the language of the Phoenicians. And the Phoenician language, the ones who gave us hooked on phonics eventually.
Yes.
But this Hebrew language, the Phoenician language, when you start to turn those letters a little bit, you'll see that they coincide with the Greek Cyrillic almost exactly.
Yes.
And so you have this phonetic language, this Phoenician language, Paleo-Hebrew, which becomes the Greek language. Well, why would the Greeks use it? Because guess what? Zerah was of the house of Judah. Darda was of the house of Judah. And the Spartans were actually of the house of Shimon, one of the tribes of Judah. So now we're beginning to see here that we've got this kind of blend up that's really, it's not quite so clear when Paul says, I'm going up to the Greeks and I'm going to talk to the Gentiles. Well, now, wait a minute, Paul.
Yes.
Just exactly who are you talking to?
Wow.
So
this is deep.
In Cadiz now, the house of Zerah now shows up in Cadiz. Now, it's very funny because when you see the house of Zerah, they referred to themselves as Hebrew, not Jews. They said, we're Hebrew. The house of Perez, on the other hand, said, we're Pharisees. We're Perishim. We're of Perez. The people who called themselves Yehudis, actually of the kingdom of David. So this, we got to see this here. The Perez, the house of Perez, the brother of Zerah, Zerah and Perez twins, right? Perez, from whom the Messiah would come, from whom David would come, and Solomon would come, and Josiah would come, Hezekiah, all of those guys were in the line of Perez, and eventually you get to Miriam, the mother of the Messiah. All of this is the line of Perez. That house would call themselves Perishim or Pharisees. Perishim were of Perez. But Zerah didn't call themselves Zarakim. They called themselves Hebrew, of Aber or Hebrew. So when they started populating Spain, what did they name the main river in Spain? But Ebro.
Oh.
And,
Go ahead,
and one of their chief cities? Zaragoza. Right?
Yes.
So,
wow.
Now, so who were these people that were calling themselves Jews? Well, they weren't. They were calling themselves Yehudis or Yahudim, not Yahudin, but Yahudim, the plural, Yahudim. These Yehudis were of the kingdom of David. So if, we call ourselves Americans because we're the kingdom of the United States, but those who were of the kingdom of David or Solomon would call themselves Yehudis. And so the prophets always name themselves with this Yahu on the end of it. So Isaiah's real name is Yeshayahu. Jeremiah's real name is Yermayahu. Zechariah is Zarkayahu. Obadiah is Obedyahu. Even Hezekiah's real name is Yekiskayahu. And so you had all these Yahu's on the end of the names.
Yes, sir.
And this goes on until the kingdom is destroyed. And the last king to sit on the throne in the kingdom of Yahud is Jeconiah or Yekoniyahu. After that, when you look at Matthew 1, you'll see that after Jeconiah, they don't have the Yahu on the end of their name anymore. Zerubbabel. And the list go on and on and on, but there's no Yahu on the end of the name. So the Yahudis were of the kingdom of Yahud, the kingdom of David. What's your citizenship? Yehudi. Why? Because I'm from Yahud. Oh, okay, I got it. Well, you guys aren't well liked because you don't spend a lot of money as tourists, right?
Right.
And you have a bad attitude when you show up in Babylon.
Right. Exactly.
Couldn't you guys come out your Canadians or something?
Yeah.
But
right.
But the Yehudis. So when you see this was a citizenship issue. So now when you see what's written in Revelation, it says they call themselves Yahudim, but are not. They call themselves citizens of the kingdom of Yahud, but they are not. They're fakes. They're of the synagogue of Satan, right?
Teach, Doc. Teach.
It's different than saying you're of the Perishim, or it's different than saying you're Hebrew. No. You're saying you're Yahudim, that you are of the kingdom of David, and you are not, because the true king of the Yahudim is the one who was crucified. The true king of the Yahudim is the one who was named as the king of the Yahudim by the Roman authority Pontius Pilate. The true king of the Yahudim is the one who had the sign put above his head in Latin and in Greek and in Hebrew that declared him to be the true king of the Yahudim. Yes. And what did he say? My kingdom is not of this world.
Teach.
And so the Yahudim, under his kingship, are in a kingdom that is not of this world. But it is a true kingship. It is a true kingdom. And so as we see this, now what happens is when we get to see with Zerah, he goes out here and they create the city of Cadiz, and the house of Zerah begins to populate in Spain in particular. Although that would cross over, from over the Straits of Gibraltar to Morocco. And so you would see this House of Zerah now is going to be heavily populated in Spain and in Morocco. And it actually reached all the way down into what is now Tunisia and Libya. That's very important because so many of the people who are Libyans today are of the House of Zerah. So many people who are Moroccan today are of the House of Zerah. And many of the Spanish people are of the House of Zerah. They knew this. They knew this for all these years. There was a continuity of faith that was going on in this region over all of these years. Then you see the rise of Spanish Inquisition. And the Spanish Inquisition says, you people who are practicing Judaism. Now remember that Judaism is a religion practiced by some of the houses. And so many of the people who were of the House of Zerah converted to Catholicism. Many of them converted to Islam. Now, this is a big secret here, Bishop, that most people in the world don't want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah, come on. Go ahead, Doc. Teach. That's it.
When we start talking about Babylon, remember that the whole of the elite in the kingdom of Judea, the kingdom of Yahud, they were taken out by Nebuchadnezzar and they were taken to Babylon. And Jeremiah tells them in Jeremiah 29, build houses and settle down, gardens, eat what they produce, have sons and daughters, find husbands for your daughters, find wives for your sons, and pray for the city where I have planted you, because if the city prospers, so you too will prosper. And they did. This is where Daniel was, right? And so here they are in Babylon, and they begin to thrive in Babylon as they did in Goshen in Egypt. And as they begin to thrive in Babylon, what do you see happen? The population gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, 70 years later, some of them go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall. Some of them go back to rebuild the temple. How many? 45,000 is all. The rest remained in Babylon. And if you read in 2 Peter, you'll find that when Peter said, I'm going to go preach here, and I'm getting out of Jerusalem because they're killing everybody, because the Messiah said, when you see this place surrounded by armies, get out. And so they wisely did get out.
Yes.
And so Peter was one of them. Now, the Roman church will tell you, he was crucified upside down in Rome. That's a Gnostic writing that teaches that.
Yes.
The Bible tells you that the last place Peter was Babylon. He went to Babylon to teach. And so Peter's in Babylon, and you have James, who's still in Jerusalem. You have John, who was up in Ephesus. You have Mark, who was down in Alexandria. And when Peter goes to Babylon, there's a huge population of Yahudim, the former citizens of Yahud, living there, including Jews, Benjamites, and Levites. That population continued to thrive, and a lot of that population didn't leave. Now, some of it went out into Pakistan and joined the 12 tribes that would become the Parthian Empire and eventually move into Ukraine. But many of them did not leave. The house of Shimon, who was given everything south of Hebron, toward along the Red Sea, populated places like what is now Mecca and Medina and Yemen. Okay? That was the house of Shimon. And during the time of Muhammad, they were known as Qurayshi Jews. In Mecca.
I didn't know that.
So here you had all of these Jews living in Mecca and Medina, and you had, they would call themselves Jews, but actually the house of Shimon, living in Yemen. How do we know that Yemen is the house of Shimon? Because his firstborn son was named Yemen.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And he was given what they call the Negev, right? The south, right? So there you go, right? So now, when Islam began to rise, Muhammad, he killed 600 Qurayshi Jews himself, beheading them and leaving them in a ditch after they had surrendered. What do you think the rest of the Jews around the area saw? You know, they would see the same thing in Babylon as they would come to see in Spain 800 years later. Convert or die. And so they did. They converted. And so you see many of the people in Iraq have a Jewish heritage. Many of the people in the Palestinian area have a Jewish heritage. Many of the people in Saudi Arabia have a Jewish heritage. Many of the people in Yemen have a Jewish heritage. Many of the people in Pakistan have a Jewish heritage. But they were given Islam at the point of a sword.
This is deep.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now when we come to see that, you have to ask yourself the question. People come in and say, well, we're going to bomb these Palestinians, or these people are less than animals, or they're this, that, and the other thing. Well, do you know that? Look at the need for a Messiah that was found in Shiite Islam. In Shiite Islam, you know what you have in Shiite Islam? You have the worshiping of the sun. That's what you have. Because Muhammad is preaching. You know, he's saying, you know, God has no son. God has no son. Well, he had no sons because he kept shooting his mouth off about not having any sons. So he didn't end up with any sons, right?
Right.
But he ended up with a daughter, Fatima, and she had 2 sons. And one of her sons claimed to be the rightful heir to Muhammad in terms of running Islam. And that son was Hussein, of course.
Wow.
And by the way, this name Hussein, you know, in order to be the Mahdi, and the Mahdi, by the way, is a philosophy that appears only in Shiite Islam. Right. Because they worship the sun. They worship Hussein, the sun. And so they talk about, you know, we're going to have a 12th imam. And this 12th imam is going to come, and he's going to be the Mahdi, and he's going to convert the whole world to Islam.
Right.
Now, in order for that to happen, he has to have the name of one of the sons of Fatima. That is to say, his name either has to be Hassan or Hussein. But this is the reason why this fellow, Bari Malik Shabazz, known as Barry Soetoro, took on the alias Barack Hussein Obama.
Teach, Doc. Wow, this is heavy. Oh, my mind is blown. Go ahead, Doc.
So when we get into this idea of Shiite Islam, so who are these people that are clamoring for the sun? Well, it's the same people who would have been clamoring for the true sun, but they missed him because they were in Babylon. Right. They would have been clamoring for the true sun, but they came under the point of the sword instead. And they came under the point of the sword again because they had eyes that could not see and ears that could not hear. Because the Son had come in the name of the Father, and they did not know him. So here we see that this Shiite group. Now, I can tell you that, in my opinion, the 12th Imam did appear in Islam already. And this would have been a guy they called the Bab. Now, the Bab, you ever heard of the Bab?
No, sir.
Okay, well, you know, also known as the Bab. I suppose it depends on how you pronounce it, but if you're in Britain, it's the Bab.
Yes, sir.
Well, the Bab was a fellow who was born in Babylon in the 1800s.
Okay.
And he began writing. He couldn't read or write. And all of a sudden, when he turned 16, he starts writing. And he wrote more in 2.5 years than Muhammad did that was scribed according to Muhammad in his entire lifetime. So this Bab is coming out. He's extremely prolific, and he's completely rewriting the Quran. And he's writing it with the absence of jihad. No jihad in the writing of the Bab.
Right.
So by the time he turns 20, the imams find out that this guy's writing jihad out of Islam, and they say, you know, we have to give him a little jihad, kill him. So they arrest him and his secretary, and they hire 715 crack Armenian marksmen. two, they tie these two guys up to the pole. You want a blindfold? No, I'll skip the blindfold. Just give me a cigarette, right?
Right.
Anyway, they got him tied up to the post, right? Ready, aim,
Yes,
fire, and all 750 miss. They all miss. So the Persians find out about this, and they said, well, we'll take care of it. So they came down and beheaded him. Well, his writing lived on, and so a temple was created for it. This Temple of the Bab was created, and it was created on Mount Carmel in the area we now call Israel.
Yes.
And this temple still stands there today, and it's a beautiful monument that sits up on the hill, Mount Carmel. And it has all these terraced gardens and everything else. And now they've actually put in an international courtroom there and some other things that have some really significant political implications as we get into this closing period of mankind. And here the Bab he's worshipped. Well, the Bab had a follower, and his follower was a guy named Baha'i Allah. Now, Baha'i Allah went in and he took the Bab's writings and he added, kind of triggered a little bit of jihad back in there. Jihad, which in German, jihad is mein Kampf, my struggle.
Yes.
And so here, the Baha'i Allah is writing jihad back into the writings of the Bab. So there was a temple built for Baha'i Allah in this town, Akko, which is just to the north of Haifa. And this was a smaller temple. The gardens weren't so great. That's Baha'i Allah great. But the Bab was revered. Now, the town Haifa was named after Baha'i Allah. Haifa, his temple. And the temple of the Bab has now been converted over to the Baha'i temple. Now, you've heard of the Baha'i faith?
Yes.
You remember Cat Stevens, right? He claimed he was Baha'i.
Yes, sir.
Right? Well, here you go.
Yeah.
So here's this temple of Baha'i now in the city of Haifa. Dominates the whole skyline, by the way. Dominates the whole skyline. And I was told in prayer, a number of years ago, back 2008, before I knew I was ever going to go to Israel, that there was a spot 98 miles northwest of Jerusalem that I was supposed to go up, find the temple, and denounce it, rebuke it. And then one day in 2012, I found myself at the Temple of Baha'i right there, and so I rebuked it for whatever that was worth.
Yeah.
But you see now that there's international courts going in on those very same grounds. And so you see that there is this all ties together, because what's happened is this: the tribes move out of Israel, the tribes move out of Goshen, and they begin to circulate throughout the Mediterranean, begin to circulate into Africa, they begin to circulate into Asia, they begin to circulate into Europe. The tribes are moving out. They're moving. And as they move away, the faith arrives when the tribes arrive. But as the tribes arrive and the farther they get, they leave a vacuum behind them. And this vacuum is filled with the sect of the serpent, or the sect of the rock. Remember that what was written in the Gospels, what father is it? His son was to ask for bread, would give him the serpent.
Right.
Or if his son was to ask for a fish, would give him a stone, right?
Yes, sir.
But what does Islam have but the stone, the Kaaba?
Oh, oh, that's good. Wow. That's revelation.
So you see, those who have rejected the bread of life, they have the serpent. Those who have rejected the fish, which is the testimony of Mashiach and the keeping of the commandments, they have been left with the stone. They have been left with the stone. And so those who worship the stone now then go out at the point of the sword, and they convert others to worship the stone with them. And many of those were at one time Yahudim. And so when we think we have an easy solution to the Middle East, we don't have an easy solution to the Middle East, because we don't even understand who's there. But as we look at this house of Zerah, now, what eventually takes place with this house of Zerah is you have this very fateful day in history, and it's called the 9th of Av, okay, or in the Hebrew, Tish B'Av, the 9th of Av. And in the 9th of Av, the first temple was burned. And on the 9th of Av, the second temple was burned. And on the 9th of Av in 1492, all of the Jews were cast out of Spain. And on the 10th of Av, 3 ships full of Jews left a port in Spain and sailed for the New World under their commander, Christopher Columbus. And they sailed for the New World, and they would get to the New World, and many of them would begin to populate the islands of the Caribbean. And those Jews who lived in the islands of the Caribbean would become known as the Pirates of the Caribbean. Now, let me give you an example as to some of the names that were persecuted under the Spanish Inquisition, right?
Yes.
One of the top names, the third most persecuted name, was Castro. Then comes the second most persecuted name, which was De Silva, and the first most persecuted name was Esposito.
Yes.
The most persecuted name under the Spanish Inquisition. But there were many, many names of people who were of Jewish descent. Morales, Chavez, Vasquez, Perez. All of these Hispanic names that you see, this EZ meaning the son of, but standing for Eretz Zion, sons of the land of Zion.
Yes.
And so you see that this Hebrew world that was contained in Spain, now you're talking 150 million people in Latin America, 180 million people in Latin America. So you have this teaching coming out of Israel. There's only 15 million Jews in the world. Wrong. Wrong.
Right.
There's hundreds of millions. And to say that, well, we're gonna delineate ourselves and put a line around us and say we're the only ones in the world, you're missing the whole house of Zerah. Now, many of those persecuted Jews in Spain, they went another way too. You had a lot that came to the New World. You had many that fled into Morocco, but you had a large body of them flee to the island of Sardinia, the island of Sicily, and they fled into France. They fled into northern Italy, but there were 2 strong communities where one was in Thessaloniki and the other was in Constantinople. So in other words, they went back to the areas that were founded by Darda and Calcol. And they had safe havens there for a while. It was amazing that the Jews could live more successfully with the Muslims from 1500 until about 1800, 1850. They could live more successfully with Muslims than they could with Christians. But this was the house of Zerah. Now, in today's world, they're known as Sephardim because in the Hebrew, the word for France is, or the word for Spain is Sepharad. So the Spanish are known as Sephardim. They have this language called Ladino, which is kind of a Hebrewized form of Spanish. And the traditions of the Sephardim are pretty close to the traditions of the Ashkenazim or the Ashkenazi Jews, but different because one of the policies of the Sephardim was to dress similarly to the culture in which you're in. So, and also to dress with flamboyance and joy. So you would not see these things of, what I call the yidlocks, right? Of course.
Yes.
The Jews refer to them as payas, right? The curls in front of the ear. But, we all know they're yidlocks. It's just a joke, and my Jewish friends know that I'm having a good time with it. But that idea of wearing the yidlocks and the yarmulke and having this distinctive set apart, I understand the need to be set apart because that is what holy is. The Sephardim never held that policy. They would join the culture and they would dress according to the culture. And so you see this big distinction between Ashkenazim and Sephardim. Now, in Israel today, there is a great separation. The Ashkenazim do not appreciate Sephardim, generally speaking. Now, that's not in every case. But there are many Ashkenazi families that will not allow their children to attend school with Sephardi children. The Sephardi children were subjected to an experiment called the ringworm experiment, where almost 100,000 children were isolated and given ringworm. There were children that disappeared and never came back to their families. There were a lot of things that happened where the nation of Israel believed it could do this to Sephardi children because they were somehow less Jewish than the Ashkenazi children.
Right.
And so what we see is here, so when we talk about this house of Zerah, we can see that the nation of modern Greece today, it was predominantly from the house of Yasharel. It's the house of Shimon, the house of Asher, the house of Zebulun, the house of Zerah, the house of Judah. That's what you see primarily in the Greek peninsula today. What was modern-day Greece at the time of Paul is now what we call Turkey, the Anatolian Peninsula. And by the way, the Anatolian Peninsula was probably named that after Kalkol. So the Anatolian Peninsula, however, had other tribes living on it. The house of Japheth, or the house of Japhet, is what it was called. His name is Japhet, but you know him as Japheth, one of the sons of Noah. His sons populated that peninsula. So you have Meshech, Tubal, Madai, Gomer, right? Yavan, Thrace. Remember those names?
Yes.
All of those, the sons of Japheth, and all of those tribes today found on the Anatolian Peninsula. What's confusing so many is that Gomer, his son, was Ashkenaz. So when you see Jewish people say we're Ashkenazi Jews, well, now,
that's great.
We thought Gomer was the father of Ashkenaz. How did you guys become Ashkenaz?
Right.
And you know, between me and you, Bishop, it's a question. It's a question. Okay.
Yes, sir. Wow. Man, this is powerful. Go ahead, Doc.
So we can see here now that this house of Zerah is an extremely important house. And this house of Zerah, when you're going to trace this historically, you know, a lot of what goes on when you look at when you're trying to find where are the tribes, who are the tribes. You go out and you look, and you have to look for markers that are kind of inductive. In other words, is this a tribe of Israel? I don't know. Do they call themselves after a name of Israel? That's one question. If they do, then you have some marker that they consider themselves of the house of Israel. So, for instance, when you say, well, these Ashkenazi call themselves after Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer, the son of Japheth, is that reason to believe that they are Yephetes and not Semitic people? Well, it could be, because that's who they want to call themselves after. So that's important. How you call, what you label yourself is important. There's another marker, or two markers, that are really important for bringing out the house of Zerah that you can trace historically. One is, of course, the red ribbon around the hand. You recall that when Zerah was born, he was a twin with Perez, but when he was born, the midwives marked his hand with the red ribbon. And then his hand withdrew, and Perez was born, and then he was born with the red ribbon on his hand.
Yes.
So sometimes you'll see flags that have a red hand on them. For instance, the flags of Northern Ireland. It's very interesting. In Northern Ireland, you see things like David's harp on everything, and you see this red hand. What's the red hand doing there? What's David's harp doing there? Well, it has to do with the story of Jeremiah. Jeremiah having been saved during the Babylonian captivity because they had thrown him down in the septic tank.
Right.
And, of course, when the Babylonians showed up, they figured, well, look, any enemy of Zedekiah has got to be a friend of ours, right? So
right.
They didn't kill him. They took him out, him and his buddy Baruch. And Jeremiah then took off, and he took off with, according to the legend, again, he took off with the two daughters of Zedekiah. And these two daughters of Zedekiah, they fled to Egypt. And from Egypt, they were able to catch a boat to this city that belonged to Zerah, this Hebrew city called Cadiz. And they fled to Cadiz. And then from Cadiz, they crossed over Spain through the Basque country. And by the way, the Basques are another interesting people who say, look, you trace us to anybody, right? We're the Basques. We have the oldest language in Europe. We have the oldest population in Europe, and it's untraceable. The Basques have a direct linkage, of course, to the House of Israel and the seafaring tribes that were coming out during the times of Solomon who staked out that area. So, again, you have Jeremiah with the two daughters. He goes through Spain, and then he goes due north into Ireland. And the Irish will tell you this all day long, right, when you get there. That one daughter marries the king of Ireland. And so you have this idea of the red hand of Zerah being present in Ireland. And he attended with David's harp, and he had one other item with him, which was the stone that had been anointed by Jacob, Jacob's pillow. And because he had already buried the Ark of the Covenant. Shall I give you the leak on the Ark of the Covenant? Should I tell you?
Go ahead.
I should give you the Indiana Jones on it.
Yes.
The Ark of the Covenant, the location, the Ark of the Covenant, the location of the Ark of the Covenant, it's disclosed in two documents. Okay?
Yes, sir.
One is 2 Maccabees, tells you that Jeremiah intended to put the Ark of the Covenant on Mount Nebo. But the copper scroll recently uncovered at Qumran, which is believed to have been written by Zechariah, Haggai, Jeremiah, and Baruch, detailing the town of Qumran and setting forth the location of the Ark of the Covenant above the town of Qumran, where Jeremiah left it. There have been several people who have tried to go and discover this. They have done sonar readings and everything else. They've found 2 caves located there, and the nation of Israel has allowed them to dig exactly 13 inches into the soil. So the copper scroll will give you that location. But again, when we talk about what Jeremiah brought into Ireland, the 2 daughters, the harp of David, which was left in Ireland, and Jacob's pillow, which he took to Scotland with the daughter Skoda, who married the king of Scotland, and the Scotland was named after her, Skoda, and that stone is retained by British royalty as the Stone of Scone.
Wow. This is deep. Mind-blowing. Go ahead, Doc.
So this gives you an idea of what we see here in our first segment here, Bishop, in terms of the migration of the house of Zerah. Okay?
Take your time.
One portion of the house of Judah. And, Zerah went west, went up into Europe and went west. Perez went south and east. And those were the differences.
Man. I'm telling you, this is so profound, and you know what? The exciting thing is, Dr. Pidgeon, we have back with us that we believe is the most powerful teacher that we have ever heard here on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio, and I believe America's number one political scientist, and that is the Honorable Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, discussing this brand new series, the migration of the lost tribes of Israel. Again, beloved, the migration of the lost tribes of Israel. I did not know that the term Lud would be transliterated into the word London. My mouth, again, I hate to beat a spiritual dead horse, but my mouth was so wide open, and I'm thinking, oh my God, Dr. Stephen comes straight from heaven, because this knowledge, man of God, and one of my favorite spiritual sayings that I've been teaching for years, and if I'm wrong, correct me, man of God, because a wise son receives correction, that every Hebrew is a Jew, but not every Jew is a Hebrew. And I'm going to say something to our Global Spiritual Revolution partners. Now, what I'm about to say, I'm not saying that it's in the Word of God or it's not in the Word of God. Because what Dr. Stephen Pidgeon was teaching about Lud and London and Ashkenazi and Hasidical. I mean, it's so mind-blowing that I absolutely love how Dr. Pidgeon builds the foundational background, and he brings us to the revelatory foreground of what's happening today. And I believe that the house of Israel today is Black America. And if I'm wrong, forgive me. And I've been teaching this for years, that the Jewish diaspora, when we look at whether it's African Americans or people of color, those of being of not just the house of Israel, but really the house in the tribe of Judah, that the Jews we see today, and what I'm about to say, I'm not anti-Semitic one bit, but the Jews we see today, okay, they're only Jews by religion, but they are not Hebrew by birth. And let me say that again. They're Jews by religion, but not Hebrew by birth. And if I'm wrong, definitely correct me, Dr. Stephen, because a wise man receives correction. That when you broke down that term Hebrew, and you're talking about the Ebro River in Spain, and you hit a nerve with me, man of God. And I know that this subject is ordained by God, because you made mention of the Bazik people in Spain, and that the Bazik people, I would say about 70 to 80% of their bloodline is RH positive and RH negative. And why would I say that? Because there's a lot of Old Testament scholars, theologians down through the years that's been teaching that those people who have RH positive or RH negative blood, their blood is tied back to the fallen watchers in Genesis chapter 6. But when you made mention of that term Bazik, it hit a nerve with me, man of God. These 12 tribes, again, I'm so glad that you're starting with Judah, which means not just praise, but it also means worship. And it's interesting, and not to get ahead of you, Dr. Pidgeon, and we have Dr. Stephen Pidgeon with us tonight, beginning part one of this powerful and terrific series that is really, I'm learning things that I thought I knew. I absolutely do not know concerning the migration of the lost tribes of Israel. But in Jacob blessing, and it's interesting that the scriptures say, going back to the 38th chapter of Genesis, not just chapter 38, but actually matriculate into chapter 48, that concerning Ephraim and Manasseh and how Israel strengthened himself, that the word says that Israel blessed the sons of Jacob. And it's interesting that the word doesn't say Jacob, Israel. I find that to be interesting. And then in chapter 49, and not to get ahead of you, Dr. Stephen, because I don't want to get into the other tribes. We're going to follow your lead with Judah. But it's interesting when Israel blesses the 12 sons of Jacob, that each name of each of the 12 tribes has a very prophetical meaning to it, okay? And I'm telling you, man of God, I don't want to get in front of you, but these names, when you talk about Judah means now I will praise Yah, and Reuben means surely Yah has looked upon my affliction. Gad means what good fortune. And so if we go through, we're talking about from Reuben all the way down to Benjamin, when we combine the definition, the meanings of each of the 12 names of the 12 sons and tribes of Israel, it actually reads like a story or a sentence. Now will I praise Yah, surely Yah has looked upon my affliction with good fortune. Happy am I. With great wrestlings have I wrestled, and I have prevailed. Okay, for Yah has made me forget all my toil, because Yah has heard that I was hated. Now this time will my husband be joined unto me. Yah has given me my wages. Yah has endowed me with a good gift. Now my husband will dwell with me, and Yah shall add to me, you shall have this son. And so that sentence to our Global Spiritual Revolution partners I just read there, it means, it reveals the definition of each of the 12 names of the tribes of Israel. And again, please forgive me, man of God, for getting ahead of you. But again, this topic I've heard some of these scholars teach on it, but I never understood until tonight the level in the dimensionality that it goes into. And as we follow Dr. Pidgeon's lead in the next few weeks, how the northern kingdom of Israel came into being, and the southern kingdom of Israel came into being. And I'll say this and give the floor back over to you, Dr. Pidgeon. For all of you, continue to send in your emails. We got several thousands of emails. We won't be able to get to them tonight, but continue to send your questions in, and I'm definitely going to send them to Dr. Pidgeon. And then in the next few weeks, next month, however long we stay on this topic, by the help of Yah, we're going to answer those questions. All right, 92947739997. And we talked about the splitting of the kingdom of Israel, where the northern kingdom, Israel, the southern kingdom, Judah, where Jeroboam becomes the king of Israel, and Rehoboam, the son of King Solomon, becomes the king of Judah. And I found out something today, man of God, and I wanted to share quickly, and then I'm going to get out of the way, that when we look at the first four letters of the word Jeroboam and combine that with the first four letters of the word Rehoboam, and it actually reveals, and even though there's no J in the Hebrew alphabet, but it actually reveals the Aramaic and Coptic word for Jericho, which is the word Jericho, capital Jerereho. And so that's a combination of the first four letters of Jeroboam, the king of the northern kingdom, Israel, and Rehoboam, the king of the southern kingdom, Judah. That's the first four letters of Jeroboam, capital Jere, in combination with the first four letters of the word Rehoboam, Rheo, Reho, again, Reho. And then when we combine those two words and phrases together, it reveals both a Aramaic and a Coptic interpretation of the word Jericho, capital Jerereho, which means Jericho, and Jericho means the fragrance of a moon. And that's interesting because when Abraham comes out of the Ur of the Chaldees, you're talking about the Islamic logo of the crescent moon. And I find that to be interesting. And Doctor, I want to ask you this question because, I've been getting emails, not just the difference between a Hebrew and a Jew, which you've already broken down, but this question concerning these 10 lost tribes, where they could be located today. And my question is, again, is Black America, or are people of color connected to the house of Israel or to the house of Judah, from your perspective, Doctor?
And the answer is yes. Now, In fact, I would go so far as to say when you're talking about the African Americans in particular,
yes,
people who were imported into North America, and also those of African descent who appear in the Caribbeans, right? Because you have a lot of people who appear of the African descent who were native to the Caribbean islands, right? They were here before Columbus got here. So you have to ask yourself the question, who are these people? Now, again, a lot of what we discuss about when we talk about the tribes is inductive reasoning. In other words, you're not going to be able to get it through deductive reasoning. You have to look at the historical record, and you have to know them by their fruit. Part of what has happened to the houses of Israel is, of course, suffering. Now, nobody wants to talk about it now, but we currently live under Egypt. You know, you look at the symbol of the United States on the dollar bill, and you go back and look at the old ancient symbol of Egypt, and you'll find out they're one and the same. And we live under Egypt. We live under Babylon. We have a Babylonian leadership that is full of the occult pagan practices of Babylon, and they are holding the house of Yasharel, bondage, even now. Now, for the African American living in this country, particularly those who were imported in the slave trade, who was it that was taken slave? Who was it that was brought into bondage? And why was it brought into bondage? It was brought into bondage, of course, because of the falling away, right?
Yes.
And, you know, when we look at the ancient scripture, we always say, you know, look at that house of Yasharel. They don't know what they're doing. Those guys, I'd have never done that. Yes, you would have. You were part of it. You know, your fathers were there, and they did it. You know, you say you wouldn't have been the one at the Mount Sinai who said, don't come down there. We're scared to see you. Yeah, you would have. You know, when I talk to people, they say, you know, they read the passage about the 12 spies, right? The 12 spies are sent out. 10 of them come back and say, we don't got to go in there. There's giants in the land, right? Only Joshua and Caleb, which means the dog, right? Caleb, the dog, and Joshua, they come back and say, oh, let's go in there. Let's go in there and kick some butt, you know. But the other 10 are going, don't do it. There's giants in the land. Okay, but we would say, oh, we'd be like Joshua and Caleb. We're tough, you know, let's go in there and do it. Is that right? Suppose the Exodus were to happen right now, and you're told, okay, Yah has declared the Exodus, and you're going. Okay? He's going to pick you up by the hair of your head like he did with Habakkuk, and he's going to drop you right there. Yes. And so some of you are going into southern Lebanon. You're going to be living there among Hezbollah. Some of you are dropping into the Gaza Strip. Some of you are going into that portion of Syria that's controlled by ISIS, and that's where we're going to drop you. Welcome to the new Exodus. How many are going to say, wait a minute, there's giants in the land there? You know, I'm not going to go down there and try to take a house that's controlled by Hezbollah, right?
Right.
How many would say that? I think a lot would. And, you know, so, you know, it's easy for us to criticize what we see in Scripture as what's pointed out as weakness. But it's a weakness that's in us. And it's the same thing with the falling away. And, you know, this is the unfortunate thing about the African-American tribes.
Yes.
They, too, had a falling away, right? And
that's right.
And it's not just one tribe. It's not just Judah, okay? Although I believe that when you're talking about really some deep-colored Africans, okay?
Yes.
Really deep-colored Africans.
That purple.
House of Judah, right? House of Judah. And then you see, you also see the house of Dan. I mean, look, there's a huge faith pocket, if you will, in Africa that's found in Nigeria and Ghana, right? And in that pocket, and also in Kenya. But, you know, when you talk about, like, to give you an example, Ethiopia, okay, now Ethiopia is probably Sheba, the land of Sheba.
Yes.
So when you talk about Bathsheba, the wife of David, you know, the woman that he committed adultery with, who ends up being the mother of Solomon, you know, Bat is daughter, right? Daughter of Sheba. Now, it could mean that she's the seventh daughter, but it could also mean that she was from the land of Sheba. And when the queen of Sheba came to visit Solomon, that was his grandmother showing up.
Right. Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, so what you see is a bloodline here
that is consistent with Africa. And so many of the African Americans, not all, but many of the African Americans are Hebrew. Okay?
Ooh.
But then again, many of the Native Americans are Hebrew. Many of the Hispanic Americans are Hebrew. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is that the tribes have done a diaspora all over the world. Now, you still have members of the House of Japhet. You still have members of the House of Japhet. You know, people say, my friend Stephen Ben-Nun, he says that Esau is found in Italy. Now, I agree that Obadiah puts Esau in Italy. But remember that Esau had Esau was cut off from the birthright, right?
Yes.
Remember, he was cut off from the birthright and was cut off from the inheritance. And he goes to his father after Yaakov has stole the blessing, and he says, he stole my birthright, and now he stole the blessing. And he's weeping, and he says, have you nothing for me?
Right.
And his father says, I'm sorry, my son, I have nothing for you. Now, in Hebrew, there's a word for nothing. The word is ayin, right? Ayin, like zero, right? In the Paleo-Hebrew, it's a zero. Ayin, zero. Tribe in Japan, an Aboriginal tribe in Japan that is covered with hair, and often the hair is oftentimes red hair, but they're so covered with hair they can withstand the cold temperatures in northern Japan, sometimes with wearing only a loincloth. Okay, very hairy people. And they call themselves the Ainu, our nothingness. Okay? Now, it's my conviction that tribe is direct descendants of Esau.
Okay.
So you see here, you see that you have this dispersion of the tribes really all over the world. But when you see what's going on in northern Africa, the Moroccans, the Libyans, the Tunisians, many of those people were the House of Zerah. When you get to Nigeria and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and Cameroon, many of those people are the House of Dan. And from Kenya and down into South Africa, you have the House of Judah. Even from Ethiopia and going south, there was the House of Judah that infiltrated into that area. Now, is there still the House of Dedan? Is there still the House of Mitzrayim and Put and Cush? Yes, there are. And those people groups still exist in the Sudan. They still exist in Libya. And you still have the sons of Ishmael throughout the Arab world, and you still have the sons of Shem, right? Shem had Arphaxad, who was the father of Hebrews, right? Arphaxad. But what about Aram? That's the father of the Syrians. The Syrians are the house of Aram, the son of Shem. Ashur, that became the Assyrian Empire. The Kurdish people and the Assyrians in that area are of the house of Ashur, the son of Shem. And Elam, the son of Shem, is in Persia. I mean, that's where Daniel was buried. He was buried in the city of Susan, or Shushana. This is where his tomb is. That's in Iran today, but it was always known as Persia. What about the Persian people themselves? Who are they? Well, the Persian people themselves are not all Medes, right? It was the Medo-Persian Empire. And the Medes were of Madai, the house of Japheth. So you have the Medes blending with the house of Elam, a son of Shem, to create the Persian Empire. So this is what I'm saying to you, that in the African-American community, the brothers and sisters in this community who don't need to hear it from me, but the brothers and the sisters in this community need to know that when you were taken into captivity, this was the word of Yah. And you were taken out of Africa for a specific reason. What was a curse has become a blessing. And I think for the Hebrew community in the African American community, just keep in mind one thing, okay? There is a Mashiach who died on the cross, whose blood was divine.
Oh, glory.
And who opened the door of salvation for all of us. And before we stand around jumping up and down and saying we're this, that, or the other thing, All have fallen short of the glory of God. All are sinners. There is no one good, not one. But yet Mashiach has reconciled us to the Father, has reconciled us to the kingdom. And he has done it by the name of Yah, which he declared to us and will declare to us, that the love of the Father might be in us as the Father is in him and he is in us.
Yes. Oh, glory. I love it. And you, a man of God, you are also a prophet and the seer of God, because what you said was so prophetical and true, speaking truth to power here with, back with us, the Honorable Dr. Stephen Pidgeon here, and only here on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio. And in the African American community, in Black America alone, not most of Black America, but a big proportion of Black Americans have left God. They have left Yah. And because of that, there is a proportionate percentage of Black Americans, just like any other people who leave God, who are cursed. When you got, and I read something today which really, really sickened my heart, man of God, in our remaining minutes, and not to get away from the migration of the lost tribes of Israel, but you made mention that God turned this curse into a blessing as far as a slave trade. But you got people like Beyonce now. Now, remember a couple of months ago, we talked about Oprah Winfrey creating her own church, the old church. Now, Beyonce, this R&B singer who grew up in the church singing gospel songs, has created the National Church of Bay. I kid you not, Global Spiritual Revolution partners, the National Church of Bay, capital B-E-Y. And you can go to the website right now. It's national-church-of-bay, B-E-Y, .TUMBLR, Tumbler, TUMBLR.com. Can you imagine? The National Church of Bay. San Francisco has a homosexual and lesbian church, which they give all praise and worship to Beyonce. Can you imagine? This is sacrilege. This is an abomination. Her and Jay-Z bought their own church in New Orleans, Louisiana. And this is the reason why a proportion of Black America is cursed. Because when you are putting up this woman who grew up in the church singing gospel songs, but now she's looking at herself as God, as a deity. And mind you, the National Church of Bay is receiving millions of dollars, not just from Beyonce and Jay-Z, but from Oprah Winfrey. These men and women are witches and warlocks, and they're saying that they are practitioners of a theology called Bayism, capital B-E-Y-I-S-M. Now, Bay, when you look at Bay, Bay is actually a demon goddess in Persian demonology. And the term Bay, capital B-E-Y, means a governor or a principality. Remember, Paul said, we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but against what? Principality. So the term Bay is not only the name of a female goddess in Persian demonology, but also Bay was a governor or a principality in a province within the Ottoman Empire. This is the reason why a lot of people in the Black community are cursed. I'm telling you.
Even now, in this very room.
Any lasting words, man of God, before we close out tonight? This has been a powerful program.
Bear in mind that the fear of Yah is the beginning of all wisdom. And those who think that they can dabble in demonology, and even though she may think that she's raising herself up for worship, she has raised a demon.
Hey, Joe, your Pep Boys Tech here. Over the years, I've helped a lot of customers keep their vacations safe. Just a little prevention is always better than risking your trip. So stop by Pep Boys and save $50 off any Wagner Premium Brake Service. And before you travel, we'll check your fluids and alignment, as well as rotate and fill your tires for free. Pep Boys uses the highest quality brands for the best prices around. You have my word.
Offer through May 27th with mail-in rebate. Free services for rewards members. See restrictions at pepboys.com.